The cigarette trembled slightly in Thomas Shelby's hand as he stared into the blackened hearth of Arrow House. The fire had long since died, leaving behind only the faint scent of ash and memory. Outside, the wind howled through the trees like the voices of the past, calling him back to the trenches of France, to the mud and blood, and the phantom screams of boys who never returned. Tommy had always carried the war inside him, not just the bullets and orders, but the silence afterward. That unbearable silence that settled when the guns stopped, when friends turned to corpses, and when peace began to feel like a lie. The medals they pinned to his chest weighed less than the names he carved into his memory. After the war, he had returned to Small Heath with more scars than skin. The Shelby family had changed his absence. Arthur had grown wild and volatile, Polly colder and more secretive. Ada, she had learned to survive without depending on any man. But it was Tommy who changed most of all. No longer just a gypsy boy with coal on his fingers. He had become a strategist, a war-forged leader. He looked around Birmingham and saw opportunity in the chaos. If peace was a lie, then he would write his own version of it, with blood and ambition. The Peaky Blinders, once a gang of bookies and street fighters, grew under Tommy's ruthless leadership. He turned them into an empire. Racing, smuggling, bribes, deals with politicians, nothing was beyond his reach. But every empire has its ghosts. The more Tommy gained, the more he lost. Grace Burgess came into his life like a candle in a dark tunnel. She had a voice that softened the hardness in him, a smile that made him forget the fire and smoke. When she left him, his heart shattered. And when she came back, for a brief moment, he believed in salvation. But fate had different plans. Grace died not from betrayal, not from accident, but because she was married to a man who invited death into every room. Her blood stained his hands, even though he didn't pull the trigger. After her funeral, Tommy didn't cry. He poured a glass of whiskey, lit a cigarette, and stared at the moon for hours. The moon, he thought, was the only thing that never judged him. He tried to be a father to young Charles, tried to run his empire and his emotions with the same iron grip. But children don't understand why fathers are cold, or why their hugs feel like goodbyes. As the years passed, the power grew. The enemies multiplied. Lucas Shangretta came for revenge. Oswald Mosley brought the storm of fascism. Michael turned from nephew to traitor. And Arthur, always the loyal dog, began slipping further into madness. Tommy faced them all, not as a gangster, but as a man who had nothing left to lose. Each enemy taught him something new. That love is a weakness. That loyalty is temporary. That trust is a loaded gun. And yet, with every battle, Tommy survived. Bruised, broken, bleeding, but standing. Because the last man standing writes the history. By the time Tommy entered politics, he had learned to smile without meaning it. Westminster welcomed him with false hands and poisonous grins. But Tommy was not a fool. He had played in dirtier rooms with sharper knives. He stood in Parliament with a suit stitched from guilt and a heart sewn with secrets. But no power comes without a price. Ruby, his daughter, fell ill. The doctor spoke in riddles, but Tommy saw it for what it was, punishment. For every man he had killed, for every lie he told, for every drop of blood that oiled the Shelby machine. He turned to Romani rituals, to fires and curses, to gypsy elders who spoke of spirits and sins. Nothing worked. Not wealth, not influence, not prayers. When Ruby died, a part of Tommy died with her. He burned her clothes, buried her toys, sat in the graveyard under the rain and begged for a second chance. And then he left. Not just Birmingham, not just his family, but the world he had built. He wandered the highlands of Scotland, let his beard grow, drank less, smoked more. He met no one, spoke to no one, until the visions came. He saw Grace in his dreams. Sometimes she smiled, sometimes she cried. He saw Ruby running through fields of fire. He saw Arthur drowning in whiskey. Ada screaming into empty rooms. And he saw himself, alone, old, a stranger in a mirror. Redemption, he realized, was not something you earn. It's something you steal from the jaws of ruin. In his final days, Tommy returned to the ruins of the past. Arrow House had been emptied. His belongings boxed and labeled. The empire disassembled. But his mind was sharp. He discovered a plot. A betrayal so deep it threatened to undo everything. A lie planted within his own blood. It wasn't cancer killing him, as they'd told him. It was deception. He had been misled, manipulated into stepping away. And just like in France, he had only one choice left: fight or die. Tommy orchestrated one last plan. One final movement of chess pieces on a board smeared with blood and memory. He confronted Michael, faced Arthur, spoke softly to Ada, and then he disappeared again. In the end, the man they knew as Tommy Shelby died long before his body did. On a cold morning, in the hills where gypsy fires once burned, he sat atop a black horse, wearing a long coat, holding a lit cigarette, looking at the rising sun. There were no guns, no crowds, no headlines, just a man, a legend, a ghost.